3 days before my promotion was officially announced, my younger brother walked into my director's office with a USB drive and a smile, and by the end of that week, I was the one being escorted out of the building. My parents called that evening to tell me I needed to be proud of him. When I said I couldn't, they told me I was no longer welcome at the family dinner table. 6 months later, I was the one they came crawling back to. Because everything they'd built around him had started to burn. I'm Ryan. I'm 34, and I used to think I was pretty decent at reading people. Turns out I was just decent at trusting the wrong ones. I should start at the beginning, because the beginning is the only part of this story that still feels normal when I look back at it. I'd been working at a mid-sized infrastructure consulting firm in Calgary for about 7 years when everything fell apart. Not one of those glossy downtown firms with espresso machines and standing desks. More like a solid no-nonsense shop that built its reputation on municipal contracts and provincial water management projects. The kind of place where people actually stayed, where your work meant something concrete you could point to on a map. I liked that. I started there fresh out of my civil engineering degree, worked my way up from junior project coordinator to senior. And by the time I was 32, I was being groomed for a regional director role that had been vacant for almost a year. My supervisor, a straightforward woman named Patricia, who had built half her career on the same projects I was now running, told me directly in February that the formal offer would come in Q2. I wasn't being arrogant about it. I'd earned it the slow way. My younger brother, 2 years behind me, and about a decade ahead of me in our parents' eyes, had joined the firm 8 months earlier. I want to be fair here, because fairness matters to me even when it costs me. My brother is not stupid. He has an MBA from Queens. He's good in a room. He can present numbers like he invented them. When he came back from a stint abroad, doing supply chain work, and told me he was looking for something in infrastructure, I genuinely thought it could be good. I even put his name forward to Patricia. That was me. I vouched for him. My parents were ecstatic, of course. My brother starting at my firm meant in their mind that they now had 2 sons in the same place, which translated in their logic to double the pride. But the way they talked about it was never really double. It was always about him landing somewhere good, about his credentials, about how well he'd fit in. I was just the one who already worked there. That's all I'd ever been, the one who was already somewhere. For a few months, things were actually fine. We didn't see each other constantly because we were in different project streams. He was working under a contracts manager named Douglas on some early-stage pipeline work. I was deep in a multi-year regional water treatment expansion. We'd get coffee sometimes. I gave him pointers on how Patricia liked reports structured. It wasn't complicated. Then the Q1 performance reviews came around. Patricia sat me down in late March and told me the director decision had been delayed slightly. Not because of my performance, she was clear about that, but because senior leadership wanted to run a more formal internal competition. Apparently someone had raised the idea. I didn't think much of it at first. Formal competition. Fine. I had the track record. I wasn't worried. I found out 2 weeks later, from a colleague I'll call a hallway conversation, and leave it at that the someone who had raised the idea of a formal competition was my brother. He'd gone around Patricia, straight to the VP of operations, and made the case that the director role should be opened up to internal applicants, rather than appointed. He framed it as a fairness issue. He even used language about meritocracy and fresh perspectives. The VP, who didn't know our family history, thought it was a reasonable point. My brother had turned my promotion into a competition without telling me, and then entered it himself. I confronted him that evening. We were in the parking garage, and I just asked him directly, "Did you go to the VP about the director role?" He didn't deny it. He stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets and said, "I just thought the process should be transparent. You'd win on merit anyway if you're the right person." I stared at him for a long time. "You could have talked to me first." He shrugged. "You've had a head start for 7 years. I thought that was worth acknowledging." I didn't yell. I didn't grab his jacket. I just nodded slowly and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for about 15 minutes before I could bring myself to start the engine. That night I called my parents. Not because I expected them to fix anything, but because it still felt like the right reflex when something went wrong. My dad listened to the whole thing and then said, "Well, it sounds like he just wanted a fair shot, Ryan. You can't fault him for that." My mom said, "He worked really hard for that MBA. I think he just wants to show what he can do." I said goodnight and hung up. The formal competition ran through April. I put together a strong application package. Patricia was professionally neutral throughout the process, which I respected. My brother submitted his own. I didn't read it, I wasn't supposed to. But I heard later from Douglas that it was polished. Queen's MBA polish. The kind that photographs well in a boardroom. 3 weeks into the process, something happened that I still find hard to describe without my jaw tightening. I had a presentation scheduled with the VP and 2 board members to walk through my 5-year infrastructure expansion proposal. It was the centerpiece of my application. I'd spent weeks building out the financial modeling, the environmental compliance framework, the stakeholder engagement plan. Real, ground-level work, based on 7 years of knowing how this province operates. 2 hours before the presentation, my laptop stopped recognizing my USB drive. Not just my files, every version I'd backed up to that drive, gone, not corrupted, gone, like someone had formatted it. I had cloud backups, thankfully. It took me 90 minutes to piece together a workable version from what I had online. And I walked into that presentation looking like a man who'd just spent 90 minutes doing what I had. Just spent 90 minutes doing. The VP noticed. He was professional about it, but he noticed. I never proved what happened to that drive. I still can't prove it. But I know I left it on my desk 2 days before the presentation because I'd plugged it in to add updated cost projections. And I know my brother had a habit of staying late. And I know that when the competition results came back, he got the role. The day the decision was announced, Patricia called me into her office first. She looked genuinely uncomfortable. She told me the decision had come from above her, and that she was sorry I'd had such a difficult presentation. I thanked her. I kept my voice level. She told me she hoped I'd stay with the firm and that my contributions were valued. I said I needed some time. I took the rest of the day off and drove out to Nose Hill Park and sat on a bench and looked at the skyline for a long time. Calgary doesn't care when you're having the worst week of your life, which is oddly comforting. That evening my parents called. Not to ask how I was doing. To share the good news. My mom's voice was bright and warm. In a way I don't think I'd heard since my brother's convocation. My dad got on the line too and talked about hard work paying off and about being proud of both his sons. Both, he said. Like including me was something he'd remembered to do. I told them I wasn't doing great. That I felt something had happened with my presentation that wasn't accidental. My dad's tone shifted immediately. Don't do that, Ryan. Don't turn this into something it isn't. Your brother earned this. My mom said. It sounds like you're just disappointed. That's understandable. But please don't take it out on him. I went quiet for a while. Then I said, I vouched for him. I put his name in. Neither of them said anything to that. The weeks after the announcement were the kind of quiet that has weight to it. My brother moved into the director's office. He started sitting in on meetings I used to run. He was careful around me. Not guilty careful, more like cautious careful. The way you are around a situation you've decided isn't your problem. My colleagues were kind in the way people are kind when they know something happened, but don't want to step into it. I kept working. I had projects to finish. I'm not someone who walks away from half-done things. Then my parents invited me to a family dinner to celebrate his promotion. I declined. They called back. My dad said something about how this was childish, how I was making it harder than it needed to be. My mom said my brother had specifically asked if I'd be there and was disappointed. I told them I was happy to see everyone at Christmas, but I wasn't going to sit at a table and celebrate something I believed he'd gotten through sabotage. My dad's voice went firm. That's a serious accusation, Ryan. You can't go around saying things like that. I'm not going around saying it. I'm saying it to you. The call ended badly. 2 Sundays later I came home from a grocery run to find my parents' car in my building's visitor parking. I live in a condo in Beltline. It's mine. I bought it 4 years ago. And I have always been specific about who has a key. My parents have a copy for emergencies. When I walked in, they were sitting in my living room. My brother was with them. I stood in the doorway holding 2 bags of groceries and just breathed for a second. My dad spoke first. We need to talk about where this family is going. I set the bags down on the counter. How did you get in? We have a key, Ryan. We raised you here. You didn't raise me here. This is my home. My brother stood up with his hands raised like he was moderating something. Let's just talk, okay? Things have gotten really tense and I don't want this to be how it goes with us. Then maybe, I said slowly, you shouldn't have gone to the VP without telling me. His jaw tightened. I didn't do anything wrong. The process was fair. The process was fair, I repeated. Right up until my USB drive got wiped 2 hours before my presentation. The room went quiet. My mom looked at my dad looked at my brother. My brother kept his face very still. You don't know what happened to your drive, he said finally. No, I agreed. I don't, but I know I had it, and I know the timeline. My dad stepped forward. This is exactly what we're talking about. You're holding on to something that may not even be real. You're letting bitterness make you paranoid. And it's affecting the whole family. My mom said, we just want the family to be okay. That's all we want. My brother said, I'm sick of feeling like a criminal for succeeding. Something settled in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. I looked at the 3 of them and I understood, maybe more clearly than I ever had before, that they had never once considered the possibility I was right. Not for a second. I wasn't asking them to prosecute anyone. I was asking them to consider me, and they couldn't do it. I need you to leave, I said. And I need the spare key back before you go. My dad's face hardened. If you can't let this go, Ryan, maybe you need to let this family go too. I held out my hand for the key. He set it on the counter, not in my hand. On the counter, like a statement. They left. I locked the door and stood in the kitchen for a while. The groceries were still on the counter. I put them away one by one, slowly, just as something to do with my hands. About 3 weeks later, I left the firm. Not dramatically. I gave proper notice, finished my handovers, said genuine goodbyes to people I'd worked alongside for years. Patricia gave me a reference letter that I still have. I took a contract role with a municipal engineering office in Edmonton to clear my head and figure out what came next. Lower pay, quieter work, different city. It was the right call. My parents left a few voicemails in that period. My dad clipped and formal, saying that cutting off communication was immature. My mom softer, asking if we could try to have a conversation. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't ready, and I was also done performing readiness I didn't feel. Then one morning in November, around 7 a.m., my phone started ringing and didn't stop. I was still half asleep when I saw the notifications piling up. 17 missed calls from my dad. 8 from my mom. 4 from my brother. Multiple texts, each more fragmented than the last. Dad's first few were terse. Call me immediately. Then they became something else. Ryan, this is serious. Please just pick up, we need you. I made coffee before I called back. My dad answered on the first ring, and I could hear right away that something had genuinely broken in him. His voice was different. Not the firm, deliberate voice he used to shut me down. Something older and more frightened. There's an investigation, he said. Into the firm. Into the contracts. I sat down slowly. What kind of investigation? The Whitmore contracts. The Northern Water Services procurement. Someone filed a complaint with the Provincial Integrity Commissioner. There are auditors, Ryan. They've been in the building for 2 weeks. I knew the Whitmore contracts. My dad was on the board of a company that had won several municipal infrastructure contracts over the past 4 years. Contracts that my firm had been involved in assessing. There had always been something slightly uncomfortable about that overlap. Something I'd noticed but never pressed, because my dad had always been so definitively above reproach in how he presented himself. Who filed the complaint? I asked. Silence. Then my dad said, we think it was Douglas. Douglas. My brother's former contracts manager. The one who'd watched the whole internal competition play out from close range. We need you to come, my dad said. We need the family together on this. I thought I wasn't part of the family, I said. Not to be cruel. Just as a statement of fact. Ryan. His voice cracked slightly. Please. I told him I'd call him back and hung up. I sat with my coffee and thought about Douglas for a while. Quiet man, methodical. He'd been at the firm for 12 years and had flagged procurement irregularities twice before in other contexts. I knew this because Patricia had mentioned it once. He wasn't the type to make things up. He was the type who waited until he had everything lined up before he moved. I looked up the Provincial Integrity Commissioner's website. There was a public notice of an active investigation into procurement conduct related to several Northern Alberta infrastructure contracts. The firm was named, my dad's company was named, my brother was named. Not as a complainant. As a subject. I put my phone face down on the table and looked out my window at a November sky that had gone flat and gray the way Edmonton skies do, when winter is done pretending to delay. My dad called back 20 minutes later. I gasped him. The auditors found something in the Whitmore file, he said. His voice was steady now, controlled in a way that told me he'd spent those 20 minutes composing himself. Some of the scoring documentation on the bids. There were revisions made to the assessment criteria after initial submission that appear to favor one bidder. The timing aligns with when your brother joined the projects team. I didn't say anything. He says he didn't do it, my dad continued. He says Douglas had access to those files too. But Douglas has a paper trail that goes the other way. I thought about a USB drive wiped clean. I thought about an internal competition that appeared from nowhere. I thought about a USB drive that maybe wasn't the only thing that had been revised at a convenient time. What do you need from me? I asked. We need character statements. We need family visible. We need you at our side, Ryan. People know you left the firm. If you come back publicly as family, you want me to show up and look supportive so it looks better for him. He's your brother. He went to the VP without telling me. He got a role I'd spent 7 years working toward. And now you're telling me he may have committed procurement fraud in a role he only had because the process was manipulated. And you want me to stand next to him. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear my dad breathing. Ryan, he said finally. So I'm sorry. About all of it. About what I said at your condo. About the dinner. About the key. I'm sorry. It was the first time in my entire life I'd heard my father apologize without a qualifier attached to it. I let it sit for a moment. I hear you, I said. But I can't be what you need me to be right now. I'm not going to lie for him. I'm not going to make something look okay that isn't okay. If there's an investigation, it needs to run. That's how it's supposed to work. Even if it destroys us? I didn't build the thing that's being destroyed, Dad. He didn't respond to that. After a while, he said he understood, and we said goodbye, and the call ended with something quieter than either of our previous conversations had ever managed. The investigation, it turned out, was thorough. Douglas had been meticulous in a way that only someone who has watched things go wrong for a long time before deciding to act can be. He had timestamps, version histories, email threads, and 2 internal witnesses who corroborated his account. The provincial audit found that assessment criteria on 4 separate contracts had been modified after initial scoring, with changes that consistently favored a single bidding firm, the one my dad sat on the board of. My brother was placed on administrative leave, pending the investigation outcome. My dad's company was flagged for debarment from provincial contracts, pending the conclusion of the process. It wasn't the end of everything. The legal process is slow, and most of this is still ongoing as I write this. But the damage to the firm's reputation was immediate and severe. 2 major municipal clients paused their contracts. A partner left. The director role my brother had occupied for less than a year sat empty again. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing when I found all this out. I did feel something. It wasn't clean satisfaction. It was more complicated than that, something between relief and grief, which is a strange combination to sit with. My mom called me a few weeks after everything became public, not to ask for anything this time, just to talk. She told me she'd been speaking with a counselor, which surprised me. She said she'd been thinking about how she and my dad had always framed things between me and my brother, how they'd talked about his accomplishments in a way that implicitly made mine seem like the baseline. She didn't use the words she should have used, but she was trying, and I give her credit for that. She asked if I'd be open to having dinner sometime. Not a reconciliation dinner with speeches and resolutions. Just dinner. I said maybe in the spring. I meant it. My brother hasn't called. I don't know if he will. Part of me expects a message someday. When the legal dust settles. Something. Carefully written, probably reviewed by someone, that positions things in a way that's manageable for him. I'm not holding my breath and I'm not dreading it either. We're just 2 people who happen to share parents, and for now, that's the most honest thing I can say about it. My contract in Edmonton turned into a full-time offer, senior project engineer on the city's long-range infrastructure plan. Real work. The kind that takes years and shows up in the ground eventually. I took it. I found an apartment near the river valley that I like better than I expected to. I cook more than I used to. I sleep better. I also met someone, which I mention not because it's dramatic, but because it matters. Her name is Margot. She's a landscape architect who works for the city and has very strong opinions about urban tree canopy, which I find genuinely interesting. We went for coffee the first time and talked for 3 hours. And I didn't feel like I was auditioning for anything. One evening a few months in, she asked me if I missed Calgary. I thought about it honestly. I told her I missed some of the people, missed the mountains being close, missed a few restaurants. She asked if I missed my family. I said I missed the family I thought I had. The one where my parents saw me, and my brother wasn't competition, and Sunday dinners weren't a performance. That family, I said, I don't think ever quite existed. What existed was a version of it that I'd filled in around the edges with things I wanted to be true. She didn't try to fix that or soften it. She just nodded and said, yeah, that's a specific kind of grief. It is. It is exactly that. I still have the reference letter Patricia gave me. I still have the engineering calculations from the regional water treatment project. The one I spent 2 years on, that was actually built, and is actually running, somewhere north of Red Deer. When I think about what I made in those 7 years, the thing that holds up isn't the title I didn't get. It's the work. The work is still there. My family spent years telling me my brother was the one going somewhere. What they missed was that I was already somewhere, and I knew how to build things that lasted. I'm still building. That part hasn't changed. The difference now is that I'm building for myself. In a city that doesn't know my last name. With a woman who likes me without the footnotes, and with that specific quiet satisfaction of knowing I didn't have to burn anyone down to get here. The investigation did that on its own.